We turn now to a different kind of storm, this one brewing over a school in Canton, Massachusetts. It's a school for children with disabilities which uses painful skin shocks to punish misbehavior. 3 years ago, we were provided rare access inside the school, which has now come to the attention of the United Nations. The UN calls the so-called treatment torture and has called on the Obama administration to investigate.
That's right, and you earn one token, okay?
Could this classroom for special needs students on a leafy campus in Massachusetts be a torture chamber?
Which clock is 3 o'clock?
According to the United Nations, the answer is yes.
Okay, you ready?
Yep. That's because of the brand of teaching practiced here, electric shock. They gave me a sample. I'm glad it's over. That's right. About half of the 220 students here, who have a variety of disabilities and many of whom are violent, are regularly hooked up to the device in this backpack, which delivers an electric shock when they engage in forbidden behavior.
The device is simply a device that has absolutely no side effects and is extremely effective as a corrective procedure to encourage children not to show violent behavior, not to show self-abusive behavior.
Trust me, it hurts, but that's the idea. The shocks are punishments meant to help the children learn and keep them from hurting themselves or others.
I mean, you just don't see this kind of dramatic, immediate improvement in, I think, most behavioral projects.
Dr. Matthew Israel runs the Judge Rotenberg Center. He says students are attached to electrodes sometimes as long as 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes for years at a time. Each student wears 4 or 5 devices on their arms, legs, and sometimes torsos.
It has no detrimental effects whatsoever.
It hurts, though.
It's intended to hurt, and if it didn't hurt, it wouldn't be effective.
We spoke to Dr. Israel when we visited the Judge Rotenberg Center back in 2007.
And it's at this point that the skin shock was...
He was and remains a staunch defender of his controversial method of behavior modification, saying it has dramatically changed students like Brandon. Before he started the therapy, Brandon would hit himself over and over again and nearly starved himself to death.
What a guy! Look at you!
This is Brandon after the treatment. Proof, Dr. Israel says, that the school system of reward and punishment works. So when someone calls this torture of school children?
The real torture is what these children are subjected to if they don't have this program. They're drugged up to their gills with drugs that cause them to be so sedated that they essentially sleep all day, or they end up in state institutions or warehoused or in jails.
The skin shock is not used until a court and the child's parents have approved. Dr. Israel maintains that for a small group of deeply troubled students, it is both appropriate and effective. But it doesn't come cheap. The school costs $200,000 a year for each student, largely paid for by tax dollars. You are aware that some people see you as a sort of quack. You do know that.
I do my best.
Does it bother you?
I'm quite confident that the procedures we hear are all based firmly on the professional literature of behavioral psychology. Building a big reward area, which is like an arcade.
His theory of reward and punishment is based on the work he did with the psychologist B.F. Skinner,
I'm going to use this switch.
who he studied with at Harvard.
We go to the gift fair.
And in addition to the shock devices, he also showed us the reward room, where students can buy prizes with points earned for good behavior. For years, Massachusetts State Senator Brian Joyce has tried to shut down the school without success.
If this same treatment were allowed on terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, there would be worldwide outrage.
Now the United Nations agrees with him. The UN's top authority on torture says the prohibition on torture is absolute and has called on the Obama administration to launch an investigation into the school.
To be frank, I was shocked.
In your opinion, as an expert on torture, is it indeed torture?
Yes.
No question.
I think I have no doubts about it. It is inflicted in a situation where the victim is powerless. And, I mean, a child in a restraint chair being then subjected to electric shocks, yeah, how more powerless can you be?
Would this be permitted if it were a convicted terrorist?
No, of course not.
The school sent us these videos to show how disturbed some of the children are, and a response saying, "It is just as ridiculous to equate JRC's aversive therapy, which is court-approved on a case-by-case basis, with torture, as it is to call a surgeon's knife cutting into flesh an assault with a dangerous weapon. The alternative is to be drugged into insensibility, restrained, secluded, and warehoused in a state mental hospital. In effect, a form of living torture." Several parents we spoke to said they believe the shock treatment has helped their children. Linda and Richard Doherty say nothing else had worked for their son, Mark, now 24. When did he start hurting himself?
He must have been about 7 or 8 when he started to bite himself, from his knuckles all the way up his arm.
Yeah.
But now, when you say bites,
Bite and tear at his skin,
Yeah.
and he...
make it bleed?
Oh, yeah, make it bleed. It was scales. It was scales.
Linda says psychiatric drugs made him a zombie, but now he's improved to the point that he can join them for family dinners. She attributes that to the shocks.
When it went from 40 applications one week to 18 applications the next week, in my heart and soul, I know it's the right thing for my son.
It's definitely not the end of the rainbow, but it's the best for our son right now.
But Eric Rosenthal, an advocate for the disabled, says the treatment is not what's best and maintains there are a wide range of other options available.
A person with a disability is so vulnerable. Think of it. It's one thing to get a shock one day and know you're going to be out of there. You suffered from the shock. You knew you could walk out of there. But what about a child with a disability who has to get this day in, day out? The courts have approved it, but did anyone ask the child if they want to be there?
Rosenthal's recent report on the center's tactics is what spurred the UN into action.
President Obama has staked his international reputation on ending torture, and the world is now looking.